Róisín, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Second time on the podcast.
I know, I'm delighted to be back.
But first time with a novel.
Yeah, and also with no alcohol pops, because last time we had WKDs.
Oh yeah, we did.
So this is more profesh and published author now.
That's really sad, isn't it?
I know. I kind of thought you would have them, but it is 11 a.m.
You've moved into a different stage of your life.
Yeah. I've moved to North London now. I've published a book. I can't drink WKD in the morning. It's very sad.
The book is a fiction, but I think we're going to talk about the sort of the factors of how you came to write it, right? Because it follows two characters, it's Anya and Elliot, and they move into their rental home. It's the first time that they're living together, and Anya feels that the house is against her. That's essentially the sort of the opening premise of the novel.
Yeah.
How much of this is based on your personal experience of moving to London?
I've never lived in a haunted house, although like the book kind of goes into this. Like I think in Irish society, like strange stuff is more accepted. But I've never lived anywhere haunted, but I have lived in shit flats, and I wrote it in a shit flat, and that's what I know. So if it's like write what you know, that is what I know. My experience of moving to London has been like I've had bed bugs, I've slept on sofas, I've slept in bunk beds. In one of my flats, like someone got stabbed. There was one that I lived in where it was like a really cheap flat. It was really nice. It was in Haggerston. But there was one washing machine for the entire building. There was like maybe 50 of us. And like there was some sort of feud going on with the other tenants that I couldn't really understand. Two people really hated each other, and one of them took a shit in the washing machine room once. Yeah, it was insane. That was the worst place I've lived, but I had the most fun living there.
But wait, why were you sharing a washing machine?
I don't know. I kept like messaging the landlord and being like, could we have one in our flat? But our flat was like really, really tiny, and we didn't have any like shared living areas. We just had these two big bedrooms. Mine had a bunk bed in it, and so we didn't have a washing machine in the kitchen. It was like in this little room to the side.
It's funny, do you know, I came to see you do you interviewed Oisin McKenna. Where were we? Were we up in Haggerston?
That was really nearby.
And we were talking about like how cramped it can be when you're living in London rental accommodation, and how you feel like you're on top of each other. And then do you remember like during his reading, someone's washing machine was going off upstairs and the whole building was rattling?
And it happened, I was in like a cafe the other day for another reading, and then like someone started making something clearly in the building next door, and the person who was reading, they had to like shout as they were reading it, because it was like, but I remember that about Oisin's, which his book is also about housing, so it made sense.
It really hit me in that moment. I was like, wow, isn't this, this so on
very real.
I think that's what's interesting about this novel, or what I enjoyed about this novel. It is about being, well, the sense of feeling haunted. And I do get that coming from a Catholic family. Like people always laugh at me. Actually, on this podcast, I've been laughed at because I've talked about how my mum's house is haunted.
Yeah, but I believe Donna. She said somewhere was haunted.
Thank you. Thank you. And we have like a lot of, Catholic memorabilia, I guess.
Yeah, and like superstitions. Like I remember my mum used to put out like a little bowl of salt one day, like maybe for like All Souls Day, and I got in trouble when I was a kid for like putting my finger in it because that was bad or something. But like in Catholic households, you are more superstitious. Like Catholicism and magical thinking kind of doesn't cancel each other out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you can kind of have both,
isn't it?
Yeah, we're not supposed to do that.
Yeah,
but we do.
I hate when people point out that glaringly obvious dichotomy. It's like, well, look, all right.
But as an English Catholic, have you seen dead bodies? Because I keep talking about this by accident, that like Irish Catholics often see dead bodies.
I'm actually going to be sick that you just called me an English Catholic.
I know, but okay, as an Italian English Catholic, but you know what I mean? Like I can't imagine going to a funeral in London and like just seeing.
Yeah, we have the body out.
Right. Okay.
We didn't do it for my nonna, actually.
You didn't?
No, we didn't. But
you think people would be like?
No, but I mean, we were around it. We just didn't do sort of like, we didn't have her in the house for 3 days.
I think that's the English thing, that's not as common, I think, here. It's kind of like just hard to support that, again, because there's no places to do it. And that's really common back home, which is in the book as well, that like Elliot finds that really strange, that she's kind of been around death and feels okay with it. And he doesn't, like, it's very Protestant.
And she hates his Englishness at parts of the book. Yeah. Like, she really struggles with it. But I think that maybe that's, like, sort of one morsel of it where you can kind of give him a free pass.
Yeah, I think that like, I wanted, obviously they're not from hugely different cultures, but in some ways they are. And when it comes to her thinking that something's wrong with their house, he's very logical and he can't accept that. And I think because they have to live there, so he's just kind of shut that part of himself off. And I think that was part of writing the book, was when you look for a new flat, it's a really weird experience, and you're kind of walking into like someone's living there and you don't know anything about them and all their stuff is there, and it's really like uncanny and weird. Or like if you're moving into a flat share, you kind of have to go and be interviewed by people. All of that stuff is really strange, but because we have to do it, we just stamp it down and we're like, okay, it has to be done, whatever. And it's only when I was sitting down for months and months and writing about it that I realized how odd it was, which, and like uncanny, I guess.
There's the bit where they're first moving into the flat and she's really uncomfortable with the inventory, like what's been left in the flat, and specifically the bed and the mattress. Yeah. And I suppose I've sort of desensitized myself to that. And also actually in my current flat, I don't have any furniture. It's all mine.
Yeah, so you have your own bed.
Yeah.
But is that the first flat that you have your own bed in?
I think that's the first mattress I've ever had.
Yeah.
That's mine.
Yeah.
And that's so strange, isn't it?
So weird. And it's almost like the point when you're renting, when you become a bit grown up, is when you buy your own bed. I've done it once. Like every other time I've moved in and I've been like, oh, I'm going to get a mattress protector. It's like kind of disgusting that it's someone else's mattress, it's someone else's bed. You don't know anything about it. Like, as I said, I've had bed bugs twice. You don't like... you just kind of just like fit yourself around, like even the dust that Anya becomes really obsessed about is like the fact that it's other people's skin and that it's all over the house and she doesn't know whose skin it is. Like it's kind of those like little minutiae weird things that I wanted to pick apart. But also when you're renting and you have to pay over like thousands of pounds at once, you're not going to buy a bed because it's like an extra £500 or something. Then you have to ask them to remove it. They're not going to do that.
They don't do it.
So
you're like that. What you take the flat, like the condition you
as
take
it
it in, that's it. Yeah. And it there's a particular line that she has. I'm going to butcher it. She says that she's never moved out of anywhere and not cleaned it, but she's never moved into a new flat that's been clean,
and she's never not been charged a cleaning fee and like had it deducted from her deposit, which I think is also true because I've lived in London for like probably around the same time as you, so like 10-ish years, maybe more.
Renting.
Yeah, renting. Yeah. But like
I'm also from Belfast.
Yeah, we've moved in the same. Your accent's gone slightly. But no, like when I first moved here, I remember it was like a bit more relaxed. So they would just say, "Do you want to pay for a cleaner? Do you want to clean it?" And I would just be like, okay, I'll clean it. And it was kind of fine. But now you have to be charged a cleaning fee, which is often like £250, £300. And you move into the place. And like the place that I moved into last, the people who lived there before me had some sort of big bird and it lived in a cage, and the walls were all like wrecked from the bird. But I couldn't paint, and I didn't want to start painting this flat that wasn't mine. So that was quite strange and weird and spooky, I think.
I've painted mine.
You painted time. Yeah, I remember you saying.
But I've painted it because when I moved in, I guess I didn't really pay much attention when I looked at the flat. Like it was just like, to me, it was just sort of like off colour walls. Didn't really think about it. And then when I moved in, I realised they were off colour because someone's damp. Yeah. But also it mixed with the last person's cigarette smoke. Oh. And there was, I cannot even tell you how pronounced the outline of their bodies of where they've been sitting in bed and smoking. See the outline.
As a smoker yourself, is that
well?
No, but like smoking in bed feels like another level, doesn't it?
I would never ever smoke in bed.
It's kind of one of those things that like feels like weirdly sexy in kind of like 1950s, 60s, but then you would never do it. I also didn't think you were allowed to do that in a rented flat. Because that's another thing that, like, when you move into a rented flat, they're like, no smokers, no pets, no DSS. They, like, can be so strict on who they want in there. And you're right that you don't look at them properly.
You made a really good observation in the book as well that English people hate poor people more than they hate
an observation that's never been made before.
But it's true. I hadn't thought about that before, that when Anya is looking to potentially move, and actually that's even interesting in itself because she sort of feels like she's trapped, even though she's very unhappy because of the lease. But when she's looking to move, she notes that on the sort of the right move descriptions, there's always no DSS, no no pets, and then next to the pets there'll be brackets sorry.
Yeah.
Not sorry for not accepting housing benefit, but for the pets.
Which is like that is a real thing. Like I've seen that so many times. And I remember years ago when I was ill, so when I had to take time off work, so I was having like chemo, I remember my parents were really really pro me like taking like coming completely out of work, going on like statutory sick pay. And although I had grown up on various types of benefits, I'd never done statutory sick pay. And when I looked into that, I was like, well, number one, I wouldn't be able to afford my rent if I was on this because it's not enough to live in London. But also I would have had to inform my landlord that I had moved to being on DSS, that I was no longer like employed in full-time employment. So I probably would have had to move out of the flat. And then my flatmates who were currently in it, they would have had to find someone else. So it would have like upended my life just in that like small decision. And I think that was when I started to notice it, that they would be like, no DSS, no pets, sorry. But it is, I think that like landlords will feel sorry that if you have a cat or a dog, it sort of humanizes you. If you're on benefits, they just will not entertain you on their properties.
Which is interesting because London has a really big problem. Well, actually, loads of councils have it, but London particularly has a really big problem at the moment with private rental accommodation being rented back to the council as social housing. And those landlords are cleaning up.
Yeah.
Like they are renting it back to the council at above market rate. They are bankrupting the council. So maybe that's why they don't want to take it, because they know they can get a better deal if they go straight through the council. But the pet thing's really interesting. I don't know if you saw the MP over the weekend.
The cockapoo.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny that it's a cockapoo as well, because there's a cockapoo in the book, and like cockapoos have kind of, I like them. They're very cute dogs. I know one in particular is very, very cute. It's not mine. But I think that they kind of, during the pandemic, they really exemplified like homeowners to renters, because it was like they became so expensive. They were like £3,000-4,000 to buy these dogs, and that MP, she was claiming it on expenses?
She did the surcharge, the landlord surcharge. So she lives up in Coventry, Coventry Northwest is where she's the MP, and she, on her expenses, she declared that there was this extra £900 that the taxpayer would foot the bill of as a surcharge that her landlord wanted paid to have her dog in London. And like, okay.
Well, I actually forgot that landlords can also charge you, like it's like £50 a month starts at rent for your dog or cat, which is crazy.
I think this should provoke a national conversation, because there's obviously the argument that perhaps she should have paid it herself, but she didn't have to declare it. She could have just put it in as part of her rental payment and no one would have noticed. I'm like, surely this should be a conversation for the rental reform bill. Like, why can you not have a pet?
Also, just the fact that you have to, I think what's really dehumanizing about it is when you have, because I remember when I've lived in houses before where like a pet has come into the house, that you have to ask the landlord and sort of be like, would it be okay? It's really small. It's like a small dog or a small cat or like a hamster or something. Is it okay if I have this? Any kind of small change to your life, any kind of growing up or expanding your household, you have to check with someone that you don't know who doesn't live there. Like, why does my landlord care whether I have a puppy in the flat? He doesn't live in the flat. And it's just like kind of involving this, like, I think in the reason why I wanted it to be a ghost is because they are kind of like a ghostly presence, your landlord, or like a vampire presence that's in the background all the time. If you become pregnant, or if you get a cat or a dog, or your job changes, that like it's not just you that has to adapt to that change, it's someone that you don't know, your landlord. And
you confront that in the novel, because there's a point where I think it's Anya, it might be Elliot as well, where they're talking about how like the landlord knows absolutely everything about them, like in terms of like their bank accounts or their marital status, like he like has this, he obviously, that's my misogyny at play. They know everything about the tenant, but they don't even know who the landlord is. They're going through an agency, and they don't know who actually owns the property.
But I think that's true as well. Like I was quite shocked at how much I had to tell my landlord about myself, particularly when I rented in Belfast, because Belfast has this strange system, like a guarantor system. It's like really common at uni.
Yeah, we have it here, yeah.
Yeah, but like I remember when I moved back to Belfast during the pandemic and like I rented there, and I still had to provide a guarantor. And I remember I was with like my partner at the time was English, and he was really confused by this, and he was like, but I'm like, I'm a grown adult, why do I have to like tell them that my mum can pay the rent for us if we can't pay? So even that, so then they have to ask like, oh, so what do your parents do? Do your parents own property? And then it was like, do your parents own property? Yeah, what's their salary? Do they own property in Northern Ireland? Even the stuff they know about you, like, have you ever been arrested for anything? Have you ever, like, what's your job and how long have you worked at your job? And I've had to like get references like from my boss and stuff like this just to rent a flat.
And sometimes a character, like I've had a character reference before. Which
I've been people's character references before, like
blows my mind.
To rent a flat, like it's just, why does it matter? And then it's so weird to have to provide all that information financially to say, I can pay you £1,500 a month, but then I can't go and get a mortgage because the mortgage lender looks at my salary and says like, there's no possible way that you can pay £1,500 a month, even though I'm already doing that.
Yeah.
So it just feels very strange. And I think I wrote about this for FT recently, that like there's no centralized system for checking your landlord. Like in England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, you can check different things. Local councils like and authorities let you check different things, but there's no like centralised body where you can check that your landlord is a good person or a good landlord, or check their reviews from other tenants. So it's like a complete power imbalance, which I think drives me a bit mad.
It is a power imbalance. I hadn't really thought about that before, but I just wrote a colleague's rental character witness statement, whatever it is, and the estate agent had asked for sort of proof they worked here, or that's what I assumed it was. So I was like, yes, they work here, this is their salary, and I've got no plans to sack them in the coming months or whatever. Then it got sent back. It was like, yeah, but what are they like personally?
But like, you're not going to meet these people.
I know. And so I had to write this thing about them being very trustworthy and how long I'd worked with them, and this is why you could trust them to be a tenant. And I'm thinking about it like, I mean, this doesn't necessarily apply to this particular flat because if they listen to this, it sounds like I'm being rude. But if you extrapolate it out, like the property that they're moving into is not exactly, it's not a grade A property.
Yeah.
It's not stunning. It's not like, they're moving into sort of an art museum where something could get damaged. It's like it's a property where the mortgage is probably paid off on it, and you're basically just using this person to extract wealth.
I think that the other thing is like if the mortgage isn't paid off on it, the reason why they're checking that is because you're paying their mortgage. And I think that's become way more open. After the pandemic, I found that it's become way more open that landlords were coming to other people I know and saying like, my mortgage has gone up, so your rent is going up. So it's like, why am I the main breadwinner for you?
Yeah.
Like, get a real job. I have one. Like,
yeah.
Being a landlord is not a job.
You say this, and there's always sort of this pushback on it. I weirdly said it on Radio 5 on Saturday night. I'd had a bit to drink, which is so unlike me for when I do that segment. And we were talking about landlords, and I was like, well, I think that some landlords are rather ghastly. I don't really like how they put the costs of, their personal business expenditure onto the person who's renting their property. I find that quite distasteful. I think a business is a risk. And I think that's, a risk you take when you first sign the contract with a tenant. It's not their responsibility. Or the pushback you got, the emails that I got on Sunday morning. Oh my God.
Yeah. No one is like more easily offended than the landlord class, is what I have found. I had the same thing on RT last week, that they were really annoyed and sort of saying, well, my tenants have wrecked my property. Like there's always kind of, at school that you would hear an urban legend and it'd be like a friend of a friend. There's always a landlord who's like, well, my friend, their property was wrecked by the tenants. It's like, who are these people?
You're so right.
There's always one story that's like, well, what about this? And it's like, well, inevitably that's never going to be their only property. They're going to have 7 or 8 properties, and it's going to be an inconvenience for them and an annoyance that their like product has been damaged by people, but it's just a product to them. It's not a home,
and that's a business risk.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. It is. If you're going to treat being a landlord as a business, if you're going to treat it as your career, which I think is really poisonous, then you should accept the risk for that.
There's you just said something there that is a theme in the book, a theme in the novel, about it being a house or a home. And Elliot sort of rather frankly says to Anya a couple of times, like, this is not our home. And that really actually struck me, because yesterday I was going back through the proof that you kindly gave me, and I'd highlighted it like I think like 2 or 3 times. And it was yesterday I was doing the big spring clean of my flat. So I was bleaching the walls because there's lots of black mold that will grow on the walls. If you bleach it every month, then it's fine. Keeps it at bay. And I was thinking about it like, oh my God, yeah, this is not my home. I've lived here for years now. I wouldn't even want, oh my God.
It's sickening when you think of like how much you've paid.
About 40 grand to live there.
Yeah. But, like, how much have you paid over the course of you living in London?
Yeah, I don't want to think about that.
It's like, it is sickening. And also, I think doing a big spring clean, making your home nice in any way, you know, buying bleach and bleaching your walls, like that's a thing that you would probably do in your own house or whatever, like if you had black mold. But I sometimes see on TikTok these like renter friendly renovations, and it's these people who go to such great expense and spend so much time putting like tiles on the wall that they can rip off, and it looks beautiful, but like I don't know if I would go to that level of expense and trouble for something that isn't going to be my home in 2 years' time. And then that's bad because it means that you're not making your home feel like a home because you can't change anything.
And I think I guess I was feeling a bit of resentment yesterday because I was thinking like, why am I bleaching the walls of this home? That the reason that I have to bleach the walls is because I have single glazing, and because it is just a damp property. But the argument from the landlord will be
that it was your fault. Yeah, I remember the nicest flat that I've lived in London was in kind of like a weird, like this book way. Like it felt spooky that like it was the nicest flat. The landlord was a nightmare. She was terrible. She's kind of inspired as part of one of the landlords in the book. She was my age.
Wow.
And yeah, which just like drove me mad because I think that
it would drive you mad though, because you've got a really weird thing about comparing yourself to. Sorry, am I getting too personal?
No, that's fine.
You've always had a weird thing about comparing yourself to other people your age.
Yeah. I'm like, so what has she done? Anyway, she bought this house, and she was just like, she was really upset that we were the first tenants that she'd had in. So her dad had bought her the flat, and then she'd moved to Australia. I found this all out. I was like a private detective. And she was like really upset that we weren't doing the right thing for the flat. So loads of her friends would come in and out to take away stuff that she just decided like, no, she wants that chair. And so she was kind of like interfering on our lives to be like, this isn't your house. Like, this isn't your home.
She'd come into the flat.
She would send her friends around to be like, is it okay if I take this painting? Is it okay if I take this lamp? And it was really strange. And then it was damp, and we sort of complained, and they did nothing. And then when they had the tenancy check, then it became a problem. And it was like, oh my God, the flat is so damp. You need to put all the lids on your pots when you're cooking because that's why it's damp. And it's like, well, it's damp because the flat hasn't been damp proofed. Like clearly she lived here. She had the heating on all the time because it was single glazed and it was bad. And it was the first time she'd had tenants and had to have it to that level and didn't want to do it. But I think it's quite infantilizing to say to someone, well, do you have the lids on your pots when you're cooking? It's that level of that minutiae of your life that's been curtailed by someone else, and you're told that you're not living in the right way.
There's
it's
a
very
scene in
strange.
the book where that's happening as well, isn't it? There's a tenancy check.
Yeah.
It is actually, it's so infantilizing is the perfect way to put it, because you have this stranger sent round to your home to check that you're living as an adult.
Yeah, to check that you haven't been the urban legend of the tenant that wrecks the landlord's flat. And because it's slap bang in the middle of your tenancy agreement, I always find those like really like disorientating, because it's 6 months' time you've kind of convinced yourself that you're living in a nice place and it's your place and you feel settled, and then someone comes in and takes loads of photos and sends them back to you on an email and says, oh, your bike has nicked the wall and there's damp over here, and everything about how you live is so scrutinized that you can't relax, you know? So I've always found that to be like a really horrible experience.
The lids on the pots is that is sort of the perfect like sort of encapsulation of what it is like to live in rental accommodation, because it's just like the tiny thing that you might do after work, like making yourself dinner, is being watched, is being preyed on almost.
And I think also because like especially in London, you're in this building that once was a building or like a home, and it's been bought, developed, redeveloped, split up into 4 or 6 flats. You're kind of like watched and scrutinized by your landlord and your letting agents, but also by your neighbors, because everyone's on top of each other. No one has enough space. So I remember a friend saying to me that she would get home from work late at like maybe 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, put the dishwasher on, and then they got like a note from their neighbors being like, please, can you not do this at night? And she was going, when do you want me to do this? Like, can I not use the appliances in my own home? So I think that it's like, it doesn't have just an effect on you. It has an effect on like the idea that you live in a community, because you're kind of at odds with these people and no one has enough space. So it becomes really like you're brushing up against people and doing things the wrong way. And it like leads to this weird, almost like NIMBYism, I think, in some places.
It does. It's sound NIMBYism, because that's like a big, it's almost like a confrontation for her in the novel, when she can hear people moving around upstairs.
Yeah.
Or she's very aware that the front door is not her own. It's actually a shared front door, so people can go in and out of it whenever they'd like to. I'm going through something at the moment where I have a neighbour who is, I guess, a sound NIMBY. And she has put her bed on the wall next to the front door.
Why?
Honestly. And the
bad
complaints day in, day out about people using the front door. I think I left to go at 5 a.m. to...
Yeah, 'cause your hours are like long.
Yeah.
Very hard.
But I went... but I went out to go at 5 a.m. She's like, where are you going? And I'm like, who are you to ask me?
Yeah, why is it any of your business?
Like, if I was going out, for example, to do something, you know,
dodgy,
sordid, that's my business.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not as if you're you're running like a brothel out of your house, like you're going to work. But I think, that was one of the things I didn't put it in. Yeah, and that would be... It's
a live work, I think, some of the buildings. So I could do that.
Okay, well, that's something to consider if it ever gets. But it was one of the things I didn't put in the book, and I kind of regret not putting it in, is the neighborhood WhatsApp group, which I think is also kind of spooky and weird. And I've left kind of like everyone I've ever been in, apart from the one that I'm in now, because people just become insane in them, and they use them for. And the one that I'm in now is also insane, but I'm finding it quite funny.
I've never left a single one. I've got all of them.
Really?
Yeah. My favourite one is this property in Tottenham that I lived in. And funny enough, the landlord actually owned, it was a skyscraper, and he owned like 20 flats in there. So my God, I mean, I don't know how much he's raking in, but it must be so much money. All they do is complain about the Amazon delivery drivers.
Oh,
I know, but it's the reason I stay is because there's like I'd say like half of them are on the side of the Amazon delivery driver, where they're like, well, why are you ordering so much? And these people have to work really hard. And like, I'm sorry that the package wasn't exactly where you wanted it to be left, but like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
You know, you just go to, it was right by, do you know one of those places that's got like every shop you could ever need to buy anything from?
Like a shop, like a mall?
No, like what they call, do you know where it's got like a big Iceland Foods, and it's got like
a high street?
No, because it's more like they're like really big shops. Like it's got an Asda home.
Oh, a retail park.
Yes, it's right by a retail park.
Yeah.
So their argument is that you can walk 2 minutes and just go and buy it.
But like that level of being so interested in other people's lives, like this is, I think that private.
I'm doing it.
No, but it's kind of true, because being interested to that level in other people's lives, that level of nosiness is not a community. Also, like Anya and Elliot, when they move into this place, it's quite nice. They have all the things around them that should make up a community. But I think over the course of the book, they realize, or Anya realizes, that these are just places for them to spend money. They're not real hubs of community, so they don't know their neighbours, which is another thing that I think in London you don't know your neighbours. Like I remember living next door to these people, and I think I must have been quite young, and I really wanted to make friends with them, and I saw them moving out and assumed they were moving in, and was like, hi, I'm Róisín, and they were like, yeah, we know. And I was like, oh
no.
It was so embarrassing. I was like, oh, okay, well, good luck in your next place.
Oh no.
Ran. So I've never tried again after that.
But also, isn't that funny that they knew who you were?
Well, they know me to see, but I had never seen them, because it was like, and I think, some places they won't even take your post. Like it's weird. It becomes quite adversarial, I think, and I think that is a problem of just how housing exists in London. That it is adversarial. You're in competition with people. Oftentimes when you go to view places, you're there with like 7 or 8 other couples. Even now on my street, there are like houses that on a Saturday morning you'll see the estate agent there just like going through a conveyor belt of people coming in and out to see this flat and bidding for it, which is this another horrible thing that didn't exist before. Because I think first come, first serve is not how you should do flats. But I remember, trying to get a flat and just saying, like, I'll leave work now and I'll come in 20 minutes, and then just viewing the flat for 5 minutes and giving them $3,000 or something.
Yeah.
But now it's like they don't even do that. They're like, no, you have to tell us how much you could pay. What's your top bid? Even if the flat is for £1,200 or something, you could end up paying $2,000.
My flat was on the market for $1,190. I remember that.
But that's not
I'm
what you
not
paid.
paying that.
Yeah. I was really shocked that it was like, that was a new thing. I'd had quite a nice experience where I had lived somewhere for 2.5 years, which is the longest I've ever lived anywhere in London. And when I moved, I remember estate agents had to like explain to me this bidding thing. I was so horrified. I was like, okay, cool.
It's very... I also think that there's the most, to jump around a bit, there's the most extraordinary generational divide in how much people think we're paying for rent.
Yeah.
Like or people outside of big cities.
Yeah.
Like we had, I don't know, like a while ago, like that, not at this company, but somewhere else, I was interviewing a few people, and there was like one person I was going to offer the job to. And then I was like, do you live in London? They're like, no, but I'm going to move. And then this person ended up turning down the job because they had no concept of just how much it was going to cost to live here. And they didn't have that. You need about $2,000 at the beginning.
If not even more than that. Like,
well, I meant for a house share.
Yeah, but for a house share, yeah, I think you would need that.
But
like,
probably more, actually, yeah.
Yeah, but even I genuinely don't think I could move to London now. I moved here when I was like 21, and I think like when I moved here, I remember maxing out my credit card, maxing out my overdraft. I had terrible credit for like 5 years because once it's bad, you're just stuck with it. But I don't think I could do it now. I think that the barrier to entry is so much higher.
It is.
Because of rent. And I think that like having been recently like speaking about this quite a lot and writing about it quite a lot, the comments, which I read, even though I shouldn't, are like, well, why do you live in London? If you can't afford it, just leave. It's like, that is not an answer to this question. People should be able to freely move. It shouldn't be that you can only live in London and that you can only work in publishing or journalism if you have such huge amounts of generational wealth that you don't have to worry about finding a flat. But that is kind of what's happened.
Those
sadly.
same people will talk about representation and they'll be like, well, they're not more working class people working in journalism because they can't afford to. That's why. It's I think that maybe we might be the last cohort of journalists where you could get in.
Yeah, I think it's like it's also that journalism is now seen as kind of like a whimsy job because it's like it's poorly paid and it's full of people that don't have to worry about their like housing situation as much. I mean, the other thing that I've been talking about is when I moved here, I remember thinking that everyone was kind of in the same situation, and then as I've grown older, have realised that not everyone is accessing it in the same way. And I don't think that's not a good thing, because I don't want my friends or like people I know to feel like I'm coming for them when I'm talking about housing. It's just like no one should be trying to like hack the system or not want to talk about their own situation because they're embarrassed about the fact that like their parents have given them money or their parents have like something that they can help them with. It's just like, I am not attacking individuals for that, but that is not how the system should work, and we should be better at talking about that. I think the other thing in the book that's different from Onion Elliott's culture and that I've noticed from living here is that like there is a squeamishness with talking about money in English culture, which then feeds into the squeamishness of talking about the housing crisis. We can make these big platitudes about fixing it, but when it actually comes down to it, no one really wants to talk about it as much.
He's incredibly squeamish, isn't he? There's a point where friends of theirs get engaged. Am I giving away bits of the book?
No, I think that's fine.
Yeah. That's not a big
that's
deal,
not
actually,
that's not at the end. Yeah.
But and I've never interviewed about a novel before, so this is why I'm like, yeah, anyway. But they're sort of like, should we go and open another bottle of Prosecco? And there's no Prosecco left. And there's this like awkward moment where it's like, shit, am I gonna have to go and buy it?
Yeah.
I don't have
and like, should I buy Prosecco or should I buy like the second, And the other thing about that is like they so when you talk about like hacking the housing system, they buy a houseboat and they sort of think that that's like, oh, this is our way of hacking into the system because a houseboat. And I remember this being a really stupid conversation maybe like 6 or 7 years ago that I now see play out on TikTok, where people are like, we couldn't buy a house, so we spent £40,000 on a boat and we're going to do it up and we're going to live here for a few years and then we're going to move on to our next thing. And it's very like getting in at the bottom rung of the ladder. You shouldn't have to hack the housing system.
Yeah.
And if you can put your hand on 40 grand, I would suggest that you don't have to buy a houseboat. Like, that's not.
I've thought that. I've always thought, is that not the deposit you need?
Yeah, you
like,
just
it's always confused me that.
And then 100k to do it up, and then you become like kind of what Laura becomes in the book. You become like an influencer housing content creator, which is just about flipping properties, which is kind of, I hate that. I can't believe that's a job.
Yeah.
Flipping properties for TikTok.
I do know people who do that.
Sorry.
They are doing very well for themselves. It's very difficult to look at the posts, so I have to say.
I just think flipping property, that's not a job, is it? That's something that you shouldn't tell people about. That's a vice.
I always think about like it's so you're right when it comes to money and it's very difficult to talk about it. I always think that sort of like the argument that I wish more MPs had, and I do actually think this is something that Matthew Pennycook is very aware of, who is the housing minister. I do get this sense from him that he really understands the value and how much people are putting into the rental system in a way that's been different to other housing ministers before, actually. But I always think about it in like the people will save in their hometown to move to London. And I think that like people of our parents' age or our grandparents' age think that means they're saving up so they can go and have this incredible time in London, that they can just go out every night and they can go and absorb the culture. And actually they're saving up for the deposit, which on a £950 room, which is what most of them are at the moment, in a shared 6-bedroom house, you're going to need to stump up a £1,200 deposit on that. Your moving fees, your random agency fees that, by the way, are not legal anymore, but you still will be charged them.
I think that they've made them illegal, but they find different things to charge you for, which is just the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's weird talking to older people about the book and about this because they get very frustrated because they're like, well, how is it worse than what we had? And we'll often tell you stories about like squatting or, living in bed sits and stuff like that. But like, first of all, you can't really do that anymore. There's property guardianships, but you don't save that much rent, and you're living in like disused police stations and stuff like that.
Yeah, or actually, we've got a video going up of a disused hospital, and to live in an old hospital, where there is a walkway, and it's £600 a month.
Yeah, like that was what I paid for a room when I moved to London. Like, that doesn't feel like a hack to me, but that's another way people are like, oh, well, I live in a property guardianship, or they live in like essentially these weird like kind of new communes or warehouses. I remember like at uni and stuff, that's what people did. They had like these big warehouses that they all lived in together. And it's just, I think that the reason why older people get frustrated is that seems like a very young way to live. And that there's often a sense of like, well, why can't you just grow up? If you can't live in London, just move somewhere else, which brings with it its own issues. That doesn't solve the housing crisis. Like, if you look at the pandemic, what happened? People left London, they went back to their hometowns, and kind of that ruined the private rental markets there, because suddenly you had this influx of people on London wages who were saying to letting agents locally, oh, well, I can pay you £300 more, so I'll just pay you £300 more. And that definitely happened in Belfast, that people were kind of bringing the bidding process there just because they were used to paying £900 for a room in London, and suddenly they could pay half of that. And so why not pay 60% and just take it off the market from someone else? So it's just telling people to get out doesn't really help.
And those costs don't come back down.
No, it's just for the next generation. And then we become the people that are like, oh, well, it was bad when we lived in London too. And so there's no kind of elders that stay within the system and try to make it better. There's this line in the book that she describes as like putting her hands in nettles and then complaining that it stings, but if it doesn't sting for her anymore, then it's fine, which I think is kind of how we talk about housing, that once you're out of it, you're like, oh, I don't really care anymore.
Yeah.
But then it matters for everyone else.
Yeah.
It becomes like kind of in this country, it seems like it's seen as a personal failing.
I genuinely get scared about the end of the tenancy and renewing it. That really frightens me.
And then you can't live properly because when you have, I remember there was one time I was always renewing my tenancy in January. So that's like the worst time. But the whole month before, you're leaving work at like 6 o'clock at night. It's pitch black. You're spending your whole evening like queuing up outside flats, which is what they do at the beginning of the book. Like it's so miserable. It's so depressing, but you kind of have to do it. And there's no way of getting out of it. And for the whole month before, 2 months before, 2 months afterwards, you're broke. Your whole life kind of stops while you move into the next place.
It becomes your entire life.
Yeah.
I'm really frightened about it because my shower broke like 4 times in 2 weeks and it kept electrocuting me. I am not joking. The water was itchy. And I was like, is this bad?
And did he give you money off the rent?
No, of course not. And the thing that I'm really worried about is because I contacted the landlord to be like, please, can you fix this? I'm worried that they're going to be like, she's difficult.
Yeah.
She's going to go at the end of the tenancy.
I think that is like a real thing that people do where they put up with stuff. Or a friend of mine had a similar thing that her bathroom kept flooding and she was being like so kind of semi-apologetic to the landlord about it that she was like, well, I think he'll let me stay then, because I'm like, oh, it doesn't matter. I remember living in a flat in Hoxton where the boiler kept breaking and it was in the summer and the flat was so hot all the time that it was kind of fine that we were having freezing cold showers. But finally he sent someone out to fix it and I came back and there was just red stickers all over the boiler and it was like, do not use. So I called the landlord and he was just like, yeah, it was leaking carbon monoxide.
Oh my God.
Okay, slay. And I was like, so what's he doing? He was like, well, if you stay, like we'll fix it in the next couple of days and we'll give you 2 weeks off the rent. And me and the person,
good deal.
Yeah, we were like, okay, but is it a good?
And you nearly died.
Yeah, we were being slowly poisoned.
And I guarantee that you didn't have a carbon monoxide monitor in your.
No, but they have to provide that, don't they? But then it's like,
because I don't have one.
I think it's been some places I've lived haven't had fire alarms.
Our fire alarm's been knocked off the wall for the past 3 weeks, so I'm not convinced of its safety.
I think it's like they put it up there. It's in the check 6 months in. They don't check that stuff.
Well, do you know what's really funny about this? In my hallway, the fire alarm is off the wall, but there's no wires that have come off with the firebox. So I'm like, was that just a prop?
Yeah, it could have been. Also, if people are smoking inside the flat, did they just take it down?
There you go.
Yeah.
I feel like we've talked pretty much about the rental and we haven't really talked about
sorry.
But I mean, I think just go and read the book. Should we say it like that? Unless you'd like to.
Do.
I mean, I love the book and it's like, it's very nerve-wracking for you, obviously, as a first time, the first time being published as a novelist. You've been published many other times as a journalist. But I think there's a part of you as a friend that panics when your friend puts the book out.
I kind of didn't want to ask you to read it or anyone to read it because it's so awkward to be like, oh my God, if this is terrible, what am I just can't be friends with this person. But hopefully
I loved it. I flew through it. I didn't even tell you when I started reading it because I was like, I don't want you to I don't want to be perceived.
which we all struggle with, including Anya.
But I loved it.
Who is not me.
Anyway.
Thank you for having me.
It'll be linked in the bio.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks.